Greetings, gamers. Tim Kirk here again, and if you'll pardon the mess, I just have moved quite a bit of furniture into this room and rearranged quite a bit. Now, ordinarily, I want to talk about gaming and game stuff. That's what my blog is generally about. My game stuff, other people's game stuff. And I have some new games to talk about, and I have some old games I'd like to go back to do part two of the sort of off-the-shelf of obscure games. But today, I wanted to discuss something a little more important. And when you hear me talk about it, I may babble on like normal. But what I wanted to talk about was the representation of different points of view in gaming and other media. The reason I want to talk about this is there was a thread on one of the forums that I read about gender and sexuality and sexual orientation. And the fact is, other than various WASPy, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant viewpoints, which is technically what I am, or viewpoints that are very similar to that, we don't get a lot of variance because most game creators are male and white and have been brought up in usually a Western or European based culture that is descended from roughly the same history at some point. Now the problem with that is that we don't include other viewpoints. We don't include people who have different viewpoints or other biases. I'm not quite sure how to put it because it's not really a bias, but we don't represent homosexuals, transgendered, bisexuals, women, people of color, and the like very well. Part of it is, the fact that it does tend to call a certain cultural stereotype, which is WASP, which I'm using just as a shorthand, not necessarily specifically to refer to everybody who's white and Anglo-Saxon of descent, but a general overview of that kind of spectrum. Now, the reason that it's become an issue, and the reason I thought to bring it up, is another forum brought up sort of as complaint about why we're talking about this now. And I want to say to them, if they see this, why aren't we talking about it now? Should we have talked about it yesterday? Last week? How about we talk about it tomorrow? Let's put it in a box. Shove it aside. Only talk about it sometime in the future. A year? 2 years? 10 years? When is it appropriate to talk about these issues which have become ingrained into basically nerd geek hobby? Tell me, when is it appropriate? Because to me, we're overlooking a huge batch of potential fans, of people interested in our works, who enjoy the same things when it's not just a creator, but enjoy the same things as you. They might not enjoy everything the same way as you, but you shouldn't expect that. I don't expect it. I don't expect people to play a role-playing game I wrote exactly the way I wrote it. Shock, surprise. I want them to play it close to it. I want them to use it as inspiration. But at the end of the day, what matters is their table and how they're handling it. And that's kind of how I'm coming to this situation. I think it's time we bring some of these subjects out in the open. To give you an example, a comic book fan, female, got up before a panel of comic book creators. You'll probably be able to look up the specific event I'm talking about. She asked them why there weren't more or better representation of women fundamentally. And they said, basically, they don't write to women. Not an excuse. You're cutting off 50% of your potential market. Because there are a lot of geek girls out there. There are a lot of girls who like comic book characters. The fact that we're getting movies that are turning out to be good for our time period, for comic book characters, are only adding to that, and TV series and cartoons and the like. And you're ignoring an entire market segment because that's the way it's always been done. Maybe comic books should die. Maybe gaming as it is should die. If we are not going to try and embrace a broader number of people into our fandom. Maybe they should. Maybe they should wither away with old things like kicking the skull of our enemies across the courtyard. Because times change. And if we don't embrace the fact that they have changed, and that these are people too who are interested in some of the same things we are, and should include them rather than reject them, maybe it's time for us to die and go away. Our hobby. Another example is a woman critiqued a piece of cover art from a popular comic book, or reasonably popular comic book. She was talking about its artistic merits and its meritorious representation of women. It's not very good representation of women. And she got rape threats. Okay, dear comic book and gaming fans, if you're threatening somebody on the other side of a screen that you don't know with rape, you shouldn't be reading comics. You shouldn't be playing role-playing games, because you obviously don't have enough human empathy and interaction with humans to do so. This anonymity we have, I don't have much of it because I'm putting myself right there on the screen, but the rest of us have that we can hide behind isn't an excuse to be an asshat. It's just not. And worse, that person you may be complaining about may be a creator themselves. They may create something you really love. More importantly, the people who write comic books have for decades written about heroes. People who wouldn't think of treating another human being the way you are treating them, the way you're ignoring them, the way you're treating them as not being a member of the human race. Now, as a whole, some of the places I go in gaming are more welcoming than others. Some of the comic book places I've been and fans I've interacted with are better than others. I'm not saying all of them are like that. Maybe not even the majority, but enough to do it online that it's a problem to me, and it's a problem we need to talk about. We need to include people of more ethnic types, different sexualities, and different viewpoints than our own. As I said, as I represent myself, I'm pretty much a standard geek. I am white. I come from lower middle class, and male, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form gay. And for many years, that was a problem. You know why it was a problem? Because I didn't have the basic empathy towards another person because they were homosexual. Because I did not understand that the similarities between me and that person were more alike than the differences. Sure, they want to sleep with a guy, big deal. Or they're a woman who wants to sleep with a woman, big deal. That's not the important part. The important part is we both like games. We both like superheroes. We both like comic books. I found a common point of interest with that person, and it helped me overcome my prejudice, along with many, many friends who were gay or transgendered. Many, many friends who pointed out I was being an asshat. So let me be your friend and point out some of you, not all of you, but a few of you, are being asshats. You need to be better than that. You need to live up to the examples of the characters that you are a fan of characters like Captain America and Spider-Man. Do you think Spider-Man would ever threaten somebody with rape? The only way I can think of it is if a completely crap author got a hold of him and wrote him. Which it can happen. There are bad authors out there who write bad stuff and really don't get the characters that we love, especially in serial media like comic books. But we need to be bigger than that. We need to reach out. We need to be better. We need to be fans of the character who is a hero and not just the character because of his costume or his fights, but the heroism, the things they stand for, the things that matter. And that's why I'm here. The things that matter to me are treating other people with dignity and respect, regardless of their ethnicity, their culture, their race, their religion, their sexuality, their sexual characteristics, or their gender, which are different things. Physical sex, male, female. That's binary, that's genetic. We try and change it with primitive surgery. Someday we may be able to change it with advanced genetic therapy. I hope for the sake of those people who feel feel that they are not in the appropriate body that we can. Because to me, they deserve the same happiness that I want and desire. You deserve the same happiness that I want and desire. We should never let it become so emotionally attached, so important, that we are hurting and hating on another human being around our fandom. Ever. And I can understand. It's awkward sometimes to be put in that position where somebody says something that's negative that you don't like. But we've got to learn to accept other people's opinions and accept that maybe they're right about some of those opinions. I looked at the piece of art in question that the woman was threatened over, and I wouldn't think twice of the cover because it's about as tawdry as most comic book covers have that I'm familiar with in the last decade are. They don't make them like they used to. That's true. And that's okay. But her complaints were about bad art, about bad representation of women. You know, she wasn't complaining about the fact you liked that comic book or those characters. She was merely pointing out it could be better. And it can be better. There were artists out there like Kirby and Adams, and there's a list a mile long that could have done fantastic art. And we have let them slip away from us over years. They've gotten old, they've passed away, some have retired. And yet, these creators that are here today are trying to become those people, trying to get their art to that quality. So they should listen to the people who have differing opinions and aren't telling them they're the greatest thing ever. We should listen. Maybe one day one of those artists will be, somebody we recall as fondly as Kirby. Excuse me. I've been sick, and unfortunately it's still kicking my butt. But we need to be inclusive. We need to be bigger than our prejudices. We need to be better men, better women, better whatever you are. If you're a sentient groundhog, we need to be better sentient groundhogs together. Because we really need to be inclusive of more than just the stereotypical white male geek. You want a woman who's interested in the same stuff you are. Don't be an asshat. Welcome them with open arms. Even if that person, I talked about it before, but even if that person's a so-called fake geek, which I don't believe in, but if you think they're a fake geek, maybe it's time to show them what real geekdom is, what a real geeky interest in something is. Share with them your love of something. Don't push them away. Don't hate them because they don't like it. Show them what's good about it. Show them how to be included, how to belong, how to be awesome. That's all I really have to say. We need to be better. We need to include people of all sexes, genders, sexualities. Just what we should do as human beings.